Caesar's invasions of Britain mark the beginning of written British history. The sole literary source is Caesar's own account, which is unashamedly subjective, and no archaeological evidence exists. A broader examination of his and Britain's respective condition and interaction, however, presents a picture which is objectively at odds with popular history. Caesar's prodigious ambition and goals can be traced through the circumstance and experience of his early life. He was the scion of one of the most venerable patrician families, the gens Julia, which boasted a mythical descent from Julius, the son of Aeneas. Like Cicero, Caesar received his education under one of the best orators of Rome, Marcus Antonius Gnipho, a freeborn native of Gaul, educated at Alexandria, who is said to have been a man of great genius, of singular memory, and well read in Greek as well as Latin. Caesar's family were populares, one of the two principal political groups of the later Roman Republic. Both his father and father-in-law were politically prodigious. However, it was the latter, Gaius Marius, whose ambition and success is most noticeable in Caesar. He was both a Roman general and statesman, and held the office of consul for an unprecedented 7 times. He introduced the Marian reforms which, amongst other changes, allowed landless citizens into the army, restructured the legions into separate cohorts, and crucially, bound an army to its general rather than to Rome. Furthermore, Marius had successfully campaigned in Gaul and defeated the invading Germanic tribes in 101 BC, earning him the accolade, the third founder of Rome. As a successful populist reformer and a revered general, Marius's influence over his young nephew is conspicuous. When Caesar's father died and he became head of his family, aged just 16, he inadvertently became embroiled with the other marked influence on his career, Lucius Cornelius Sulla. A civil war had been raging between the populares, led by his uncle Marius, and Sulla, a highly distinguished general and the leader of the opposition. The latter marched on Rome, achieved a conclusive victory at the Battle of the Colline Gate in 82 BC, and appointed himself dictator. As Marius's son-in-law, Caesar was therefore marked out as a potential threat. He was stripped of his inheritance and dowry and was forced into exile. The respective kudos attached to both Marius's and Sulla's successful campaigns in Gaul and Germania is overtly replicated in Caesar's own career choices and ambition. Likewise, and from an early age, Caesar sought to achieve the political predominance that both Marius and Sulla enjoyed within their respective parties and careers. Finally, Sulla's ultimate power play, marching his army on Rome before installing himself as dictator, provided the blueprint for Caesar's own subsequent seizure of power decades later. Prodigious ambition was patently advantageous, but finance to match was fundamental to Caesar's political success in Rome. As a result, increasing and insurmountable debt played a crucial role in Caesar's rise to power and his invasions of Britain. On his return from exile after Sulla's death, Caesar's captivating oratory marked him out to potential patrons. However, his capture and ransom by Cilician pirates in 75-74 BC should have forewarned future creditors of Caesar's ruthless, self-serving, populist credentials. Velleius reports that his ransom, of 50 talents of gold, was paid by the cities of Asia, and was a poorly received levy. Moreover, it was a damning indictment of the propraetor governor of that province, Marcus Juncus, and Rome's ability to combat piracy. Despite the ransom having been raised from pecunia publica, public funds, Caesar operated as a privatus, private citizen, when he retrieved the money and murdered his former captors before returning the ransom money to the people of Miletus. From this episode, a pervasive Roman maxim arose from a speech made by Caesar to the Bithynians: "One cannot abandon one's clients without earning the greatest infamy." Caesar's populist pedigree, exquisite oratory, and somewhat maverick approach secured him a military tribuneship and the beginnings of a political career. Caesar's political ascendancy was remarkably quick and belied his own financial means. By 69 BC, he was elected as a quaestor, treasury official, in Spain, and by 63 BC he had won the office of Pontifex Maximus, the highest-ranking priesthood in Rome. In 61 BC, he became governor of Spain, and a year later reached the predominant position of joint consul of the Republic with Marcus Bilbulus. Unremarkably, there were allegations of bribery, fraud, and embezzlement, which tainted Caesar's election, as did the involvement of Marcus Licinius Crassus and Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great. Caesar's extraordinary rise from relative obscurity to joint consul of the Republic in less than a decade was evidently no less extraordinary to his contemporaries than it appears today. The resultant heated political environment, amidst accusations that his appointment was achieved through the misappropriation of funds, arguably initiated Caesar's diversionary campaigns in Gaul. Caesar's astounding ambition and cynical lobbying of his two central creditors became evident when he returned from his governorship of Hispania before his replacement had even arrived. The reason for his return was ostensibly to receive a triumph for his Spanish victories. However, his haste suggests that his intention was to run for consul in the approaching elections. Caesar was initially barred from entering the city walls because protocol forbade a general's entry amidst preparations for his triumph. Consequently, Caesar abandoned his triumphal preparations, entered the city, and sought out Crassus and Pompey, who were reportedly at variance. Plutarch recounts how Caesar cannily coordinated his patron's support. By levelling your artillery against each other, you raise the Ciceros, the Catuli, and the Catos, who would be nothing if you were once real friends and took care to act in concert. If that were the case, with your united interests and counsels you might carry all before you. Suetonius saw Caesar's conspicuous currying of Crassus and Pompey as a self-serving reaction against the aristocracy, who had voted to assign him mere woods and pastures as the newly elected consul. Allegedly, it was this slight on Caesar which made him seek an alliance with Pompey, who was at odds with the Senate because of its tardiness in ratifying his acts after his victory over King Mithridates. Caesar solidified the alliance by sanctioning the marriage of his otherwise engaged daughter to Pompey in 59 BC. Caesar similarly convinced his super-rich patron Crassus to halt hostilities against Pompey and join them in a powerful alliance against all others. The resultant triumvirate saw that no step should be taken in public affairs which did not suit any one of the three. Caesar's dogged and dutiful dedication to the triumvirate saw him all but ignore his co-consul, Marcus Bibulus. Suetonius quips that acts were done in the consulship of Julius and Caesar, rather than Bibulus and Caesar. Despite this, Plutarch confirms Caesar's continuing popularity, writing that he acquitted himself in his office with great honour, gaining command of armies, and the province of Gaul. Crassus and Pompey, on the other hand, were seen by the populace as powerful parasites who share the rest between them at their leisure. Such was the perception and predominance of these three intertwined, powerful, jealous, ambitious, and self-absorbed individuals who formed that invincible triumvirate which ruined the Senate and people of Rome for selfish gain alone. By no means philanthropists, but expected and pursued a good return on their investment in Caesar. Their provision of Caesar's consulship was predicated on his promise to promote their various claims and provide vast profit. Crassus and Pompey had already been joint consuls in 70 BC, despite Pompey being technically 6 years too young. Pompey's subsequent campaigns had earned him the epithet Adolescens Carnifex, the adolescent butcher, after he massacred thousands in Spain, Armenia, and Israel. The plunder from these expeditions made him exceptionally rich, popular, and powerful. On his return to Rome in 61 BC, he claimed that his conquests exceeded those of Alexander the Great and dismissed his legions with vast land grants. Plutarch remarked that, when the cities saw Pompey the Great, journeying along unarmed and with only a few intimate friends, the people streamed forth to show their goodwill, and escorting him on his way with a larger force. Had he purposed any revolution, he had no need of the army. Such was his popularity. Caesar shrewdly stroked Pompey's ego and promised him further plunder as he cynically proposed his own campaigns in Gaul. Caesar's other main creditor, Crassus, was extraordinarily avaricious and reputedly the wealthiest man in Rome. His wealth bought considerable political influence, and his greed gained him an equal amount of criticism. He allegedly confiscated estates, bought houses in the midst of fires, and paid those who made a trade of impeachments to prevent their doing him any harm. Considered by Plutarch as inherently duplicitous, Crassus would also turn from his friends to his enemies, and back again if his interest required it. He saw him as too violent and tyrannical in his proceedings, having struck a senator on the face with his fist and driven him out of the forum covered with blood. Despite this, Caesar worked actively with Crassus to strengthen his position and had religiously backed tribunician bills favorable to Pompey since 67 BC. In 65 BC, Crassus gained the important office of censor and orchestrated Caesar's appointment to the office of aedile, which was responsible for public buildings, festivals, and the enforcement of public order. Caesar utilized his new post to magnify his own popularity by entertaining the populace at unprecedented expense, but also at considerable debt to his creditor. By the time Caesar opted to invade Britain, Crassus had subsidized his entire political advancement to the highest office in Rome and Gaul. Crassus's continued support for Caesar was, however, typically savvy. It mediated the mistrust which existed between himself and Pompey and promised profits and plunder from Gaul. Caesar's perceived success in Gaul remained inextricably linked to his continuing value to the triumvirate, its success, and his own insatiable political ambition. His commentaries conspicuously presented an argument at the beginning of each book, where he stated his objectives and reported his successes. The original dispatches served as a comfort to his creditors, maximized his support amongst the Roman populace, and continued the triumvirate's predominance. Concurrently, however, the triumvirate was becoming increasingly unpopular in Rome, and there were complaints of a general loss of liberty. Cicero complained that we are mastered on all sides, fear of death and exile. The aim of our masters is to leave nothing for anyone else to bestow. Caesar appears to have been cynically utilizing his patron's power and avariciousness to subsidize his own ascendancy and popularity, whilst laying the foundations for his future return to Rome as its champion and saviour. Caesar's reputed success in Gaul saw his popularity and military glory surpass that of his colleagues, who were again at loggerheads by 56 BC. Crassus was currently plotting Pompey's murder, and Caesar was forced to return and reconcile the two. At a rushed secret meeting in Lucca, Caesar reassured Crassus and Pompey that his Gallic campaign was on track and induced them to seek re-election for consulship in 55 BC. He incentivized them further, saying that Pompey should receive the two Spains, and Crassus the lucrative governorship of Syria. Having sufficiently softened up his sponsors, Caesar proposed that an invasion of Britain would surely secure their success in Gaul. Crassus and Pompey were evidently satisfied and supported Caesar's plan, but their blatant power extension into Syria and Spain was met with indignation in Rome. Nevertheless, and through their typical excessive bribery and the adoption of the most violent measures, Crassus and Pompey cleared the way and continued Caesar in his government of Gaul for 5 more years. This canny horse trading by Caesar, which continued his patron's support in exchange for highly prodigious provinces and claims that their profit was finally forthcoming, confirms that Caesar was placating his frustrated creditors whilst providing them with enough rope with which to hang themselves back in Rome.